So, Maliksi, we're back to go ahead and discuss more on self-control, but with something that relates a bit more specifically to a subject. And we were talking about perfectionism, something that we covered in
Oh,
a
procrastination? Oh,
procrastination we've covered already.
yeah.
So no, we're doing perfectionism,
Oh,
right? And we said previously that one of the reasons why people procrastinate is because there is this perfectionism, the idea that if there is a sense I'm not going to be able to achieve this to the level that it needs to be, then the natural tendency is oftentimes to have this hesitation, procrastination, etc. But in the conversation we were having, you said, I'm always fascinated by this natural tendency we have as people to go ahead and say, I'll start on Monday.
yes.
What did you have in mind?
Or resolutions, New Year
Yeah,
resolutions. Come
let's talk
on. I
about them.
mean, we love
Mm.
this. Now, very few people keep up with the resolution beyond January, I think. How many gym memberships for pay they never
Yeah,
really used?
common issues.
Yes, but that is a quite interesting. That's a so-called really future self fallacy, prediction of future self, meaning the future self will be more motivated, more energized, more self-regulated than the one right now. That's a
That's
quite
the assumption. I
because
look at it from a different angle.
The Monday
Yeah.
guy wakes up at 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
goes to the ice bath, meditates, just
I'm not convinced that's how it works, actually, that you mention it like that. I'm not convinced that the person is thinking about a future self doing that. That might be how it's
no,
assumed.
well,
What I'm saying
that's
to you
the
is,
guy who would do it. So I'm
here's what
guessing
I'm saying. The person doesn't,
for that guy, it's gonna
I don't
be,
think
and
that
that's me.
well, I'm sharing with you my opinion. I don't think
Okay.
the person thinks about it like that. I think they say, I, myself,
Yeah,
would
yeah,
be in
I
a
know.
different situation. But again, I'm not thinking about it as a future per se. Let me suggest this to you. The reason why people are inclined to oftentimes put things off, okay, is because it's rooted also in a perfectionist mindset. And the idea is when I start, I'm going to have to do it perfectly. And right now, right, I've got a weekend coming, I've got a birthday coming, I've got something else coming that doesn't fit within what is required for perfection. So the reason I put it off, or especially when I've failed at a task, the reason I basically, say for example, a person is on a diet, okay? And they're super strict. They're saying, I'm all or nothing, which is oftentimes how people would approach a diet, which is another discussion. But if the person is pursuing that, and we've discussed they possibly attempted in a particular way, they've exercised self-control, say, no, I'm on a diet, and the temptation remains, or it's later in the day, all the things we've discussed about how self-control fatigues, and they eventually give in. Typically, they give in, and we've said it before, they normally blow out substantially more than just the one thing that they took. And the reasoning is usually because when I start again on Monday, it's a fresh start. It's mentally a
Sure.
fresh
Zero.
start, which means I can again adopt the all or nothing approach. Whereas now it's nothing. So I failed. So it can't be all. So I might as well make the most of the current situation. And that is to go and max out on the instant satisfaction, which I know ultimately, right, is not the way to go. But because of the perspective of we have to do things perfectly, we put them out at a time when we think we may well be able to start. And we typically go ahead and start to find it's still us. It's still us. And then the natural tendency is, we grind it out. We force it. We use that, sort of intense willpower, which is a word that I say that I don't use that often. But instead of having things structured in a way or having that sort of sense of super self-control rooted to things that are immediately of value in terms of identity and all the things that I mention all the time, right? The idea is when I'm motivated by a future outcome, which I've said already is not a great motivation, and I'm under pressure to get it perfectly right, I've got the perfect combination for failure. And typically then it's, I don't want to necessarily start this again. So I delay it, I procrastinate, I max out on the impulse of, also the benefits of the moment. And really that's a matter of perspective as well. It's that perfectionist mindset that it's all or nothing that basically gets me tripped up and doesn't allow me to sort of make progress on the path, fall, whether through, it just, I'm not perfect, I fell, but the idea that get up and keep moving, or I'm actually planning and I'm taking a reward stop. In other words, I'm stopping to enjoy the sort of the success that I've had so far. I'm taking a time out and balancing that sort of sense of I get to enjoy the moment as well as heading towards the ultimate goal. And really, I think it's, this idea of perfectionism and procrastination and fatigue and all of these things that when we don't understand them well, we really, really find ourselves tripping up much more consistently than what we would like, or resulting in much more inconsistency in our own approach, which typically produces the negativity in mood. It produces lots of question marks over self. It oftentimes results in beating up on self. It can result in blaming other people. It usually doesn't work itself out well. So these subjects are so important to understand as we try and figure out how do we develop the kinds of self-control and self-regulation to avoid many of these pitfalls as we navigate life day to day.
So students are the perfect subjects for research,
Mhm.
and they did quite some. And perfectionism was interesting one. Those students who really would negatively judge themselves based on the results that they got were bigger procrastinators. Believe it or not, they were just avoiding tasks. So and the standards are really skewed, but the expectations of self were very skewed. And so
Usually to the upside, right?
well, expectations from self was the outcome was exaggerated in terms of how often should it, I should always, so they were just more working within extremes.
Mm.
And so that was negative perception of self. And then that led immediately to avoidance. Over
Mhm.
time, you just avoid something that makes you to feel so bad about yourself. So it's interesting, those students who could be more kind of exercise more self-compassion and humility, they were able to, over time, produce much better results than those who are having super high standards and then failing more often than not.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how that was helping the being more friendly toward
Yeah.
oneself was helping in the long term because the standards you were allowed to fail because it was, and then you reframe because it's just part of reality. It's and
Can I
then you
say
would
to you, it's because
do
of
something
one
else.
word? What you're just describing right now comes down to one word: expectation. The simple fact is this, is if I'm expecting something from myself and I don't achieve it, and expectation, as we've said before, is a forecast of how something is going to be. It's how I anticipate an experience will be. If I'm expecting a particular standard from myself, and even the case it might be perfection or anything else higher that I don't achieve, well, the natural question there, we've said before, unmet expectation to the downside produces negative emotion and lots of question marks. Well, if the question marks keep coming back to myself, to
Yes.
me, and now I'm having to find myself as the problem, well, what is the natural tendency we have? We quit. We bail out. We
And
avoid
mood rescue. I
because
mean,
because
by
I
any
don't
standard,
need
yeah.
to keep reminding myself of this or keep being shown up like that. So the natural tendency, and this is interesting, whenever I find a person who's failing in something and I ask them, what is your tendency in terms of self talk? Or what do you do to yourself? Inevitably, it's the one with the very high expectation of self that speaks negatively to self. And I use this example. I would sit in the consulting room and I would say to this person, I would say, imagine I had a weight here in the floor, and I point to the right hand side here of my desk. And I say, imagine I had 200 kilogram weight that's really in the way. I need it moved. Okay. And I open the door, and there's a 4-year-old that happens to be running around in the clinic. And I call them and I say, come, I need you to move this. Okay. Inevitably, that one has no clue of what that is. And they run and they will try, right? Because they have no idea. And they've called you and they want to go ahead and do something. Inevitably, you see they'll struggle. Now, one will, and then they'll run away because there's no issue. But you're going to get the odd one who's now going to get really frustrated with this task. And they're going to be really, really, sort of intensely upset with the fact that they are not succeeding because they were expecting they could do it, right? But then I asked them, would we ever be upset with the 4-year-old who didn't move the weight? And the first thing is never. Why? And I say, why would we? Because it's not possible. In other words, it's an unreasonable expectation. Then I say to them, hang on a second. Okay, we've also got this 125 kilogram power lifter that works for the clinic. And I call him and I say to him, hey, won't you move this? And he looks at it and says, no, no, I can't. And I say, but you need to move it. It's part of your job. He says, no, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. If we were to be upset with somebody, who would it be with? Again, the 4-year-old or him? The natural tendency is we get upset and angry when things are not being done the way they should be or could be by an individual. So we only ever get angry with the ones who we believe are capable. We never get angry with the ones that we don't believe could do it. So when I hear a person speaks negatively to themselves or hurts themselves, punishes themselves, deprives themselves, I always point out it's because you believe you are capable of more. Now we need to establish, is that true or not? Okay, so that's one way we'd have to deal with that. But I say to them, how would you deal with somebody else who was struggling with that task? Are you the kind of person who would shout at them or would you encourage them? Inevitably, they say to me, no, no, I'd encourage them. And I say to them, what makes you different to them? And it's this. It's you've got a higher expectation of your own skills or a higher or a belief that you are capable of more than they are. So you're more compassionate with them, but you expect more from yourself, which is why you think that the way to motivate yourself is to drill sergeant style, shout at yourself, speak negatively to yourself, beat yourself, because that's going to get you to do the task. Why? To prove you're capable. What a horrible way of living. What a useless way in many respects, and typically one that creates that negative emotion that compounds the problems down the line. So I'm seeing this more than I've seen it before, where there is this sort of encouragement towards a compassion towards self. Now, I'm not talking about be so lenient on yourself that you don't have to do anything, justify not doing what you're required to do or not meeting your responsibilities. Take it easy on yourself. I'm not talking about that at all. I think that when we are mindful that we are engaging in a task, whether it be weight loss or whether it be work or whether it be parenting or whatever else it is, those are difficult tasks. And we've said before, we're not always at our best. So there are going to be times we are going to fail. In those times, if we were to say, I'm expecting this because I am limited and this doesn't catch me by surprise. And what I probably need now is a bit of a time out and a bit of kindness toward myself to refresh in order to re-engage and keep doing what I'm doing. When we talk about perspective for life, again, we say, keep it real, keep it simple, keep it thoughtful, keep it going. The people who keep it going are the people who are able to recognize I can't do it perfectly. And that's why I don't need to wait for Monday to start the task. If I'm going to start the task, I'll start now. I might be able to make some headway between now and then. It's a mindset again that is recognizing perfection is not attainable. I am not perfect and I can go ahead. I might still choose to do it Monday because I feel like that's going to give me a sense of a fresh start. That's a wonderfully helpful thing to do. But as long as I recognize that when I start on Monday, it's going to be something that I might trip up on Tuesday or Friday, but the following Monday, I want to still keep going. Those are the people who end up becoming successful, as I've said before. A few good decisions and a lot of perseverance. You don't find people who have perfectionist view of self or exceptionally high sort of standards, people who are generally able to keep going at the same task. They may quit that one and try something else where they think they might succeed. At the end of the day, again, understanding how mind and brain work, how thinking is involved and how we relate to self and tasks and all of these kinds of things, and recognizing procrastination is not particularly helpful, recognizing perfectionism is utterly, crazy, and these kinds of things. I think it's with these understandings and with the discussions that we have, the encouragement is to try and manage things better overall Why? Because it generally produces greater satisfaction in life.
So I'm going to jump in on the word management. So
Yes.
let's look at the environment we live now.
Mm.
Okay, let's kind of look at the reality we are in. So technology first, that's constantly stealing our attention. So then we have a society that gives massive high standards. I think
Yes.
constantly celebrate the business. Then we have multitasking that is still kind of something that we should discuss. I mean, multitasking is really doesn't go hand in hand with the higher standard. If you want to achieve something, you should really focus on one task, and that has been done over and over. One task, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't have many tasks. It's just one task at a time. In what kind of environment around should we be if we really want to aim for quality?
Well, first of all, I would say to you that I would say that there's sort of a micro environment. In other words, the environment that you can create around yourself immediately. And then there's the environment at large, which you have little control over. So I think that immediately one recognizes I need to be able to distinguish between those two things and identify that I can create, this would be again self regulation, an immediate environment that makes it easier for me to do what's required. So you mentioned in that list of things, there was situation, there was distraction, there was identity, there were all of these kinds of things. And as you were talking, I was reminded of something that a really good friend of mine told me years ago when technology was really just coming in. And I was all over it. I loved the technology because I had opportunity to learn more things that I could have here instead of in a textbook or whatever else. And he said, technology allows us to do more things less well. And at first I was like, no, that's nonsense. Technology allows us to do a whole lot more stuff. And the more I think back to that statement, and I'm going back 25, 30 years ago, he made that statement. Technology basically allows us to do more stuff less well, which is to your point, right? When we are trying to multitask, when we're trying to use the technology to do so much, and oftentimes the technology is doing that in a way that is distracting. I'm working on my phone or something, and up pops an advert, and I'm following that, and I'm following the other. If we were to create an environment that is useful for success, we need to understand ourselves and we need to understand what are our temptations. You know that I love my remarkable. And one of the things that I love about my remarkable is I can draw, and that's how I think. I'm forever scribbling. But also, there's no adverts, there's no nothing. And this is not an
That's true.
advert for remarkable, unless they want to give me one, right? But the idea is create a place or an environment for yourself where you are able to have minimal distraction, where you are able to have, say, a glass of water. I encourage people drink water regularly while you're busy working on things. A time where I can actually stand up and maybe look out a window just to give me a sense of a break. You know, the no sweat exercise that we've discussed. Take a little break to do something physical, setting up a way in which you can work in an environment that allows you to exercise the self control when you need to. What I mean by that again is remember, we don't want to be living on self control all the time because it will fatigue. So, our environment around us on the macro level, on that bigger, is intending, as we've said before, to distract, to draw our attention. Because ultimately, what does it take from us? What does it get from us? We've discussed it before. If it can draw our attention, it can probably take our money, right? So, the idea is we're fighting a battle here with a group or a collective that is far more sort of committed in many respects to create an environment that makes it difficult to focus and stay focused and get tasks done. So I think just being aware of that and being aware of your own limitations or your own particular strengths and working with those things enables each person to potentially go and create an environment that they need. And when I say micro again, it might mean closing the door in a little room that allows you to stay focused or whatever that might be. I think of the number of young people who I sort of sit with and who are busy doing homework or busy doing something with headphones and they're listening to music while they are busy doing things. And every single one I've spoken to is telling me it helps them. And everyone I say, it's not possible that it helps you at the end of the day. It is a distraction. And what they oftentimes end up saying is, it's a distraction from the other distractions, ironically. What I mean by that is at least it allows me to stay here doing this, which is an indication of just how easily my attention can be sucked away by anything else. And I'm like, wow, we've really gone a long way from when, things were in the
I mean, I
past.
always think, even when you and I were young and there was no technology, I mean, we were going to library. You were getting out of the house where you
Yeah.
could, you could kind of do a lot of other stuff and avoid the task at hand. And you can, oh, let me just go and make something to eat, or let me just check that, or, whatever, and talk to this person because they're in the house or help them. But the moment you're out and you're in a more structured environment, I mean, it's immediately how you can see that it's easier. It's obviously easier. I just go back to perfectionists. Funny, I mean, they obviously by default take more because if they believe they can do more, they will take more.
Think about it again. We discussed this on the Monday nights. One of the reasons why people pursue perfection as well is because they're trying to control a future outcome that makes them look favorable. So whether it's for themselves or whether it's for somebody else's approval, if they can do a phenomenal job, the likelihood is they're going to receive the reward, which is other people patting them on the back or praising them, and that's tremendously rewarding for many people. We do a lot for the approval of other people. So oftentimes people take on something that is perfection in standard because how do you criticize perfection? So in an attempt to avoid criticism, oftentimes people will pursue something that is beyond criticism. Well, the reality is, again, it's beyond possibility as well, which means you're not going to get there. And then who becomes critical? Self-critical. Oftentimes the people who did the job or you did the job for still look at it and say, wow, what a wonderful job. To your point, there was a question that you sort of raised on Monday evening was, how do people establish the standard of perfection? And I said to you, it's not that they always establish a standard saying there is where perfection is. They're looking at the negatives. Where did I fail? Where could I have done better? And if I could find any of those, the implication is perfection wasn't reached. So that's what partly makes perfection so difficult is how do you quantify it? And the moment something is difficult to quantify, I've got to have another way of measuring it. And that's typically how perfectionists will measure.
Plus, you never celebrate. You
There's the
never
point.
see
So they
anything
can't
good.
actually enjoy
You see only
even
one side.
phenomenal work, right? As you were saying something there, I was actually thinking when you were saying when we were growing up, you could go to the library or do whatever. And I've taken quite a bit of abuse, and I mean that in the lightest way, from my brother, from Sean, and from people like that, because of the way I used to study, right? So I used to study with a set of headphones, not phones,
To block
gun
the
muffs, right? Which were
okay,
basically
noise
what you'd use,
cancellation.
noise cancellation at a shooting range, the kind of things you'd
Oh,
wear at a Formula
you're in a
One
vacuum of your
race.
own brain.
Completely. I was completely shut off. And I would lie on my bed, eyes closed, book on my chest, eyes closed. Yes, I was completely in my own head. And I would look at the page, and inevitably I'm very visual, right?
Yes.
So I would look at the picture and I would picture it and I would put it down and I would close. And people would walk, my family would walk and I'd say, he doesn't study. He lies there and sleeps on his bed. Meanwhile, truth be told, I was awake most of the time,
Mm.
right? Lying there completely distraction free and able to see how these things sort of were fitting together. And I think it's part of the reason why I think the way I think today. It's in many respects, I took the time to try desperately to understand things by visualizing them, by looking at them with almost no distraction. And what that's resulted in today, I can focus on something, and my family will oftentimes remind me if I'm focused on something that even if I'm in a place that's noisy or whatever else, I'm completely unaware of what's going on around me when I'm focused. It's almost like my brain has now become so attuned to paying attention to something that it loves the idea. So there's nothing around me that is worth taking my attention away from what I've
You're
chosen
in
to give
flow.
my attention to. And it's a choice. So what you find is, again, as we said in the last, some discussions ago, it's not something that happened overnight. It's something that progressively developed more and more. And actually, almost you know, unintentionally. But now that I know how it works, is why I structure things even more carefully to maximize those kinds of things. So many of the things that we're sharing, many of the things that I'm talking about, that we're talking about, these are the things that I apply on an ongoing basis because I know how much I need to in order to get the most out of my limitation. So anyway, my study style.
I'm imagining.
You can imagine. I think back fondly.
We need a
I
photo, right?
wish I had more time like that. Honestly, I wish at times I could just say, as I'm thinking about it right now, if I could take a week and just go and lie with my remarkable, and immediately my thinking is, oh, I'd miss Bron, I'd miss the girls, I'd miss this. And I'm like, that's why I don't take a week.
Yeah, my brain is not as good as yours. I mean, I love studying. I just have endless curiosity that just flies around. So I have, while diffuse attention, when I grab on something I really love, I have hyper attention. So
Hmm,
I kind of,
good term.
so I love discovering something that is so well explained. I wish I had that talent as well. But I can recognize it very well when someone does that. And it's unbelievable dopamine hit when you find someone who is just very good at what they do. And it doesn't matter what they are doing. I can recognize a standard. And this is actually uh, something I wish I didn't have it. My high standards are coming from this bias to look for the high standards.
Mhm.
So I never got the opportunity to practice it like them and to reach that standard. I meet them when they accomplish after long years of doing what they're doing, and you meet them at where they are, and it's just something you cannot but admire. So now I mean, it's unavoidably beautiful. It's obviously that is just out of majority of
So any of the people
standard.
that you're thinking about, because I know you love music and I know you love art and I know
I
you
love
love all of
yeah,
these
I'm
kinds of things,
eclectic.
right? So all of these kinds of things and describing the kinds of people who have achieved the level,
Yes.
that they've achieved, right? In terms of wrapping up now, what is the one thing, if we had to go and unpack their lives, that was probably common to every single one of them in their pursuit of whatever it is that they were doing to reach the level? What did they all have?
Well, I don't know them that well, but I
Self
can.
control,
Yeah, but I also, well, I wanted to say something else. Quite often we forget that for that level of excellence, some of them really had to sacrifice,
which is
depending on the field they are. So if you look at some of the people, what they achieved in medicine, especially the more complex the problem is, the more sacrifice they had to make in terms of
correct.
resources given to become that good at this. So and this is something that has to be emphasized. There are some people that they understand the cost,
Yes.
but their capacity to solve a complex problem is just, it's also rare. And I'm grateful that some of these people exist, honestly, and they solve, commit a life,
Yeah.
and probably at the expense of social life and
Yeah.
family and all of this, and move this, humanity in a different direction, or hopefully better one, and change the history.
Hmm.
And we know these people. My problem is also that I constantly seek them, and I skew reality. I very much skew reality, and I skew my reference points. So that inflicts some level of perfectionism because I can't attain that simply because I haven't been on their road.
Sure.
So there is just that deception of jump that there I oversimplify. I reduce the effort. I reduce the failure. I reduce how long it took them. I reduce the struggle. I eliminate that. You clean it. You clean the ugly side, and you just get the best. And now you have that as a reference point. And it's very hard to celebrate yourself or what you have achieved when you have those reference points.
Yeah.
And they're not wrong reference points. They're wrong for myself, for
Good
my
observation.
life. But truly, they have accomplished something worth admiring and worth, listening to. And you know, applauding to and hoping that there's going to be more of these people. But yeah, I just that's where
As as you're saying that, I was thinking now, if I were to use or to think of a word that would sort of substitute in some way for self-control, it is sacrifice.
yeah,
Sacrifice
yeah,
is, in essence, what self-control is. It's the willingness to forego something for sake of something else. And what you just described here, people who have achieved things that required tremendous time, tremendous energy, tremendous skill, tremendous commitment, tremendous all those kinds of things, because of our limited potential, they had to take all of those resources and focus them, which means bringing everything to a point at the expense of something else,
yeah,
right? That's what focus means in many respects. I'm choosing to give my limited resources to a point and not anywhere else because this is the better choice, which again means that the people who have arrived at achieving the levels of success that you've described right now are the people who prove, in many respects, the statement that we make so often. All success is the result of a few good decisions and a lot of perseverance. Those few good decisions get better and better and better the better they understand the situation. I think, and I'm concerned at times, that some people underestimate, as you rightly pointed out, the cost of pursuing certain things that are
yes,
phenomenal only to succeed and look back and wonder if it was worth it. That's not me saying I don't think people should strive to achieve phenomenal things. I think we have to be careful in many respects as to what it is that we end up sacrificing that we might not want to when we consider if we had looked at, maybe if we 10, 20, 30 years down the line. In other words, developing self control, which leads to perseverance, is one thing. But making sure that I'm clear in my decision making in terms of what I'm going to give myself to, I think that's something that we need to really, really pay a lot of attention to as well. I think we'll end on that note.
okay.
Thanks, Malik.
Thank you.